let's go ahead. Let's talk about the NFL wildcard games. But first, we have to talk about all of the teams that ended up losing in the wild card. Now, the first team to lose is, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Now, I know what you're thinking, but they aren't in the playoffs. So, how did they lose? Well, I just got a report saying that they just lost Mike McCarthy, their head coach. The both teams, they couldn't agree on a deal to extend Mike McCarthy, so they both just mutually decided to part ways. So even when they're not in the playoffs, they still lose. Even though I would have loved to see Mike McCarthy coach for the Cowboys for a million years, for or however long he stays alive and well, to coach a team, because he never lets the Cowboys down, at least in my eyes. When you need him most, he always shows up. But realistically, I mean, the first team to lose in the wild card, aside from, with, all jokes aside, is the Chargers. They went up against the Texans. That was the first wild card game over the weekend, and little bit of a letdown performance. Thought that the I really thought that the Chargers were going to be able to pull off the upset. If there was any team that was going to pull off an upset in the wild card round, I would have expected the Chargers to be able to do that against the Texans, even though, I mean, I don't know if you would want to call it an upset, because while the Texans did have home field advantage and they did win in their division, they did not have a better record than the Chargers did throughout the entire year. The Chargers won one more game than the Texans all year, but despite this, it didn't really feel like the Chargers were the better team in this one. They ended up losing 32-12. The Chargers offense really just could not get it going up until the end of the game, where they scored more or less a garbage time touchdown at the end of the game, and even then they still couldn't convert on the extra point. They ended up the ball ended up flying high into the sky, and the kicker ended up recovering the ball. But I mean, this game is mainly going to be highlighted for Justin Herbert's 4 interceptions that he threw in this game. He finished the game throwing for 242 yards, 1 touchdown, a QBR of 40, and those 4 interceptions that I just mentioned. I mean, it was a very bad game for Justin Herbert, and this does not help his playoff resume in the slightest. Throughout his entire career, it's been labeled that he was a quarterback that is very talented and can win you a lot of games, but that was basically the only thing that the Chargers really had going for them. Now the narrative seems to be shifting a little bit to where it's like, even though Justin Herbert is an incredible talent, when you need him to show up most in these big games in the postseason, he ends up vanishing. This is already his second postseason loss in his entire career. The first time he lost to Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars, where they blew like a 30-point lead, and they could not score at all in the second half, which was, again, that was a huge choke for the Chargers. And now in this one, where he throws 4 interceptions to completely lose the game. And it's not like the Texans were all that dominant on their offense either. I mean, they were pretty good on the ground, where Mixon ended up running for 106 yards, and Stroud threw for 282 passing yards. He did throw a touchdown, but he also threw an interception. But this game it was mainly they put themselves in a good position to win just because of, how often Justin Herbert was turning the ball over, which is not something that they can really guarantee on going forward, especially in their next matchup, since I believe the Texans are going to have to play against the Chiefs. And going up against the Chiefs, you're not going to get as many turnovers with Patrick Mahomes as you are with Justin Herbert. Like, that's just not going to happen. So they're going to have to really tidy up their offense, and their offense was the biggest weakness and the biggest concern for them going into this game, in my opinion. They were lucky that their defense was able to hold firm, because the Chargers more or less relied entirely on Justin Herbert's right arm, because they only got 50 yards on the ground. They were not able to do anything running the ball offensively. And so when you're stuck to just passing the ball, it makes you a lot easier to read. It makes you a little bit more predictable. It makes the chances of throwing interceptions like the way Justin Herbert did all that more likely. So they're really going to have to tidy up their offense, and this is just an embarrassing loss for the Chargers, in my opinion. Now, the next game that happened on that day was the Ravens going up against the Steelers. Another embarrassing game for the Steelers. Now, while the score was 28-14, this game was basically over right after the first half. I mean, the Steelers they did not score until the third quarter, and by then it was basically too late because Baltimore was already up 21-0, and then the Steelers, they finally answered with a touchdown, but then the Ravens responded that with a touchdown play of their own, which only lasted for 4 plays. And then once that happened, it was just really difficult for Pittsburgh to get back into the game, as both teams would exchange punts up until the end of the fourth quarter, where the game was concluded. And again, like, this is sort of the outcome that we expected. Well, unlike the last game, this was the outcome that we expected in this one. I mean, there was just, the Steelers had no actual answer for the Ravens, despite and TJ Watt, he did not record a single stat in this game, which was, rather surprising. How somebody so dominant is just not that big of a factor in this really big and important game. And, I mean, like, Lamar Jackson, he threw 175 yards. He threw for 2 touchdowns. And on the ground, they were really good. Derrick Henry accumulated 186 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns. And Lamar Jackson got 81 rushing yards. No rushing touchdowns, but again, 81 yards as a quarterback. That's obviously just great performance right there. With this performance, Derrick Henry had tied Terrell Davis for the most 150-yard playoff rushing games in their entire career. So that's an amazing achievement for Derrick Henry right there. And an interesting stat for the Steelers: the Seahawks, the Chargers, the Falcons, the Giants, the Lions, the Vikings, the Cowboys, the Colts, the Browns, the Ravens, the Texans, the Titans, the Jags, the Saints, the Packers, the Bills, the Bengals, New England, Tampa Bay, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Rams, and the 49ers, they have all won a playoff game more recently than the Pittsburgh Steelers have won a playoff game. So this is sort of the situation where they're in, and why a lot of people want Mike Tomlin fired. They wanted a lot of Steelers fans, they're really sick of constantly having these winning records and constantly making it to the postseason, because more often than not, their team is usually not good enough to win a postseason game. And because they're too good to really lose out the season, and they're not so bad that they lose these big games, but like Actually, I need to find a way to rephrase that. Hold on. So they're good enough to win you a lot of regular season games, but they're not good enough to win you any playoff games. You're stuck in like a realm of mediocrity, because a lot of Steelers fans, they would much rather have a losing season so they can actually get a rebuild, maybe get better assets at the offensive position, primarily at quarterback, and build around that quarterback and actually have a rebuilding year, as opposed to just constantly winning, and once the playoff comes, you don't win anything. It's sort of a cycle that they're tired of constantly repeating, which is why a lot of people want Mike Tomlin fired. And it makes him sound spoiled, while at the same time makes a little bit of sense. But again, I think it's more often than not, it's like a mentality of just being rather spoiled, because like you're suffering from winning a bunch of regular season games. You have any idea how much I would love for that to be my problem, that we keep winning in the regular season, that we are a good squad, that we constantly win? Like, do you realize how I would love to have that problem? Like, but that's obviously besides the point. So those were the 2 playoff games that happened on Saturday, and I was looking at the time. Unfortunately, I was unable to get through all of them, which I completely expected, which is why I'll do that in the third segment. But Going into the second segment, I'm going to talk about the NCAA game between Ohio State and Texas, because that one was a really good game on Friday. So I'll give my opinions on that right after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind.